All right, well, let's get started, and people can always join in as we go, and we'll have a recording of this that I will share in the CLC, if not tonight, first thing tomorrow. And so if you can't stay the whole time, or if you miss any part of it, feel free to watch the video. So thank you for joining us. This is Ask Me Anything, Mindfulness in the Classroom. We had such positive feedback from Erin's presentation at our Interact Summit that we asked her to come back and give us a little bit more, so that people who maybe didn't make it into the room because it was literally full, or who weren't at Interact, could join and learn a little bit more. So a few housekeeping things. Like Mamie already said, we have that chat box. We'll be monitoring that the whole time. So if you have any questions, we'll open it up to questions at the end, but certainly don't feel like you need to wait until then. If you have a question, try and write it, use the chat box. And like I said, the session will be recorded and shared. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel and make it easy to share. So our agenda will be basically, we'll transfer it over to Erin in a little bit. She's going to give us a nice mini lesson on mindfulness and how that can help improve your teaching and coaching experience. And then we'll open it up to the questions that some of you submitted already via email, and open it up to the rest of you who are on the call. All right. Well, some basic introductions. Erin, if you weren't at Interact, has a really interesting background. She has 14 years in early childhood education. And so she's not only coming as someone who can share with us about mindfulness practice, but also has been in a Head Start classroom and has been a teacher. And she's been training and consulting full-time since 2014, and has passion for helping teachers. And everybody in education knows that the hard part of being a teacher is teacher burnout and stress and anxiety, and how that not only affects your own health, but affects sort of the health of your classroom. And if you want to learn more, I will share this in the CLC also. But she has a website, Enlightening Educators. All right. And Mamie, also on the call with us, is our class specialist. Mamie is actually the first person I went to a training with. She is the person who did my pre-K obs, and I passed the first time, so thank you, Mamie. And she has been here helping us for quite some time, but is also an experienced elementary teacher, and has worked all over. And I am Liz. I'm the community manager here at Teachstone, and will be sort of helping moderate the conversation. All right, let's dive right in. Erin, I'm going to let you take it away.
Great, thank you. So, starting with what mindfulness is and kind of what it's not, I always say that my journey into mindfulness is a really funny one, because I am not your typical crunchy granola, touchy-feely yoga person. I'm not someone who came to mindfulness initially because it was something I was interested in or wanted to learn more about. I kind of came by accident. I had some stressful situations going on in my personal life, and I happened to see a meditative yoga class was offered at my gym. And I thought, well, that sounds like a way to go relax from all the stress that's going on, and yet I can still say I went to the gym today, and that is something I want to do. So I started going to this meditative yoga class because I thought it would just be a way to nap at the gym. And in this class, I started to learn about mindfulness. And I noticed that when I would leave this class, I would be really calm, and I would go back into these stressful situations in my personal life, and I was better able to handle them. And I was able to try some new techniques that I had been wanting to try, but my emotions had been kind of getting in the way of. And after these classes, I would be able to try those new techniques that I wanted to try. So I thought there must be something to this mindfulness business. And I started to dig into it a little more and be a little more intentional about it. And that kind of evolved into then not just my personal life, but my professional life. I thought if this is doing so much good for me personally, it could probably do some good for me professionally as well. And I started applying the principles I was learning to my professional life and noticed just as big of an impact there as well. So initially, I had thought mindfulness meant that I had to breathe and not think about anything and just have this blank mind, and that I probably needed to have a little Buddha on the shelf somewhere too. And luckily, mindfulness is none of those things. Well, it is breathing, but it's not about thinking nothing, because that's not possible. We can't do that. Mindfulness is a practice. We call it a practice, but really it's like an exercise. It's like any kind of exercise we do for the body, where we do it over and over on a consistent basis. Exercise, we train our body to do something we want it to do, maybe run or lift weights. Mindfulness is about training our mind to focus on what we want it to focus on, and to not focus on the negative or the stressful so much, but to focus on the moment and keep my focus where I want it to be. And so a good working definition for mindfulness is a non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. So I'm not just in the moment, but I am also not judging what's happening in that moment as good or bad. It just kind of is. And there's a quote by Meena Srinivasan, I may not be saying that right, who is the author of Teach, Breathe, Learn, and which is one of my favorite books. And she says that mindfulness is what enables us to be more responsive and less reactive. When I'm focusing on this process of training my brain to be in the moment, I'm also training it to focus on what's happening and be responsive to what's happening, ask questions about what's happening, dig in deeper to what's happening, and control where my focus goes, and not just be reactive, not go on autopilot to a situation. And this is where I think that the help to class really comes in, because class is a tool that requires us as educators to be incredibly responsive to what's going on in our classroom, to our students. It requires us to be in the moment and try new strategies, and we just can't be successful with those things when we're being reactive all of the time. And so it can really help us with the responsiveness that we need to be successful with class. Mindfulness also has some really great benefits just for our personal life as well, to help with things like burnout and anxiety. So there's been a lot of studies that have shown that by incorporating a mindfulness practice into your everyday life, it can decrease stress and depression, anxiety, conflict. I mean, think if you just took reactivity out of everything, you would get rid of a lot of the conflict that you have going on. And it increases things like attention, focus, performance, achievement, and just your overall well-being, feeling a little calmer about what's going on in your life. So to begin a mindfulness practice, we can focus on our breath first. And this is probably what a lot of us think of when we first think of mindfulness, is that process of breathing. Breathing is a really important tool in mindfulness because it's what allows us to begin to train our brain to stay focused the way we want it to. And we focus on just taking those very deep breaths, those belly breaths, and we allow our mind to focus on the breath and kind of let go of some of the other thoughts that we have going on. And at the same time, we can bring awareness to the body and the mind and what they're doing. And we can do what I like to call a body scan, where you just kind of think through your body and where you're feeling tension as you breathe and make a conscious choice to let that tension go. So many of us carry so much stress in our bodies. And when we choose to let that go, it has mental benefits as well. When our body isn't feeling that physical stress, we get the mental benefit from that. And because most of us are not used to training our mind to be in the moment, it can be helpful to use a strategy called anchor words as you're beginning your mindfulness practice. And anchor words are these words that are connected to your breathing, and they just give your mind that little bit of an anchor to stay where you want it to be. So my anchor word as I breathe in is breathing in. That's mine. Some people might want to use the word rising because they feel their belly rising. The point is to keep it simple and focused on what you're doing at the moment to bring your brain back to what you're doing. So my anchor words are breathing in and breathing out. And I just quietly mentally repeat those to myself as I breathe in and breathe out. And when I catch myself having thoughts that are not focused on the current moment of breathing in and breathing out and being mindful, and I've noticed that I've started thinking about something that's happening later, planning for dinner that night, my anchor word that I use just to kind of notice that is thinking. So I'll just tell myself thinking, and then I'll go back to my anchor words of breathing in and breathing out. And this is a technique just to start to train the mind to come back to the moment. So I was going to lead everyone through a very brief, just couple minutes of mindfulness here. Wherever you are, if you want to close your eyes, you can. If you want to find something kind of innocuous to focus on, you don't want to focus on anything with your eyes that's too busy, or it will be very hard to keep your brain on the focus of breathing. So either find something very boring to look at or close your eyes. And I'm going to just walk you through a very short little breathing practice here. So as you begin this practice, just come to the moment and begin by deepening your breath and noticing when you breathe in and breathe out. Feel the breath fill up the belly first and come up through the lungs and kind of top off at the top, and then let it out slowly. Start to slow and deepen your breath in and out. Maybe use those anchor words in your mind, breathing in, breathing out. And as you focus on this deep breathing and you start to allow it to bring you to this moment and calm yourself, think through how your body is feeling right now. Start at the top of your head and notice if you're holding any tension anywhere. You have tension in the eyes or the jaw. Take a breath and let it go. Continue to move down. Where are your shoulders? Are they up really high by your ears? Take a breath and let them come down. Continue moving all the way through your body like this, noticing where you're holding any stress or tension or tightness. When you find one of those moments, take a breath, and as you breathe out, let that tension go. Go all the way down to the tips of your toes, taking your time. And as you do that, I'm going to give you a couple minutes of silence to just focus on your breathing on your own. Use those anchor words to breathe in and breathe out. Anytime you notice you've gotten off track or you have started to think about something else, use that word thinking just to bring you back to the moment. There's no need to judge it. It's not good or bad. It just is. But you have the power and the choice to come back to the present moment. Go ahead and start to come out of that now. You may need to wake your body back up a little bit. Sometimes it's really relaxing to do that. It might start to even put you in a state that wants to go to sleep. So bring some movement back to your body. And I don't know about you, but when I do that, even just those couple minutes, I feel very centered and focused and ready to go forward with whatever it is I need to be doing. And this practice, like we just did, that was a beginner's practice. It was a very short, simple one, but that's what it starts with. And this is what you are going to find time for in your day-to-day life, so that when situations present themselves in the classroom that you need to use mindfulness for, you already have those tools. And when you're practicing this on a daily basis, or at least a semi-daily basis, and your body is used to what it feels like to breathe and bring your mind back to the moment and take the tension out of your body, you can find this centered place pretty quickly just by taking a couple breaths and letting that tension go in the classroom, and be ready to be in the moment with your students without having to do a full 5-minute meditation, as long as you're doing this practice on your own. What's our next slide? Okay, so we're going to talk about class specifically and some examples of how mindfulness can help you with your class domains and dimensions. So starting with emotional support here. Emotional support is all about being responsive to children. And if mindfulness is what allows us to be more responsive and less reactive, then it's going to be a really big help for emotional support, because all of those parts of emotional support really require that I put my reactivity on hold. When I'm reactive, I'm not going to be offering that good support for children. When I'm reactive, I'm not going to be able to loosen that control and have regard for student perspectives and allow that kind of flexibility that needs to happen for all of those good supports. And sometimes this is really challenging. You might have a student in your classroom that says, I don't want to sit by him. And our first instinct would be to say, well, we're all friends here, or that's a mean thing to say about someone, or that's an unkind thing to say about someone. And yet mindfulness or a mindful mind would not jump right into that. We would instead maybe take a breath to bring ourselves to the moment and know that this is a chance for us to be responsive instead of reactive, and perhaps ask some more questions of this child. And maybe we find out that the other child had done something to them earlier in the day and they hadn't rectified it yet, and that's why this was going on. There could be any number of reasons. I have an example at home, actually, as a parent with my youngest stepson, because there's nothing like parenting to bring out the reactivity in someone. And several months ago, we were playing a game. He'd gotten a game for Christmas, and a card game, and he really liked it. He was really good at it. He's 9 years old, by the way. And his older brother, who's 12, hadn't played it with us yet. His dad and I and him had all played it, but his older brother hadn't. And his older brother was getting ready to play it for the very first time with us. And he sat down, and my youngest literally took the instructions and threw them across the room and said, "We don't need these. I'm going to teach you how to play the game." And he proceeds to explain the game as a 9-year-old does, which is not with a lot of clarity. And his brother was confused and said, "I need the instructions." And my youngest was getting really frustrated with his brother wanting the instructions. In fact, he got frustrated to the point that when I said, "No, you need to let him read the instructions, that's how he's going to learn," he stormed off to his room. And I followed him in. But before I went into his room, I made a conscious choice that I was going to be responsive and mindful instead of reactive, because what I wanted to do was say, "This isn't fair to your brother. You have to let him learn the way he wants to learn. This isn't the way it's going to go." And when instead I decided to be mindful, I went in, I took several deep breaths because I wanted to go on autopilot so badly. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. But instead I said, "What's going on, bud? Tell me what's happening." And he just said, "Well, I don't want him to read the instructions." And I kind of took a couple minutes and I asked him a couple more questions, and I really noticed his body language. And I continued to stay committed to being mindful instead of reactive and jumping to where I wanted to go with this. And that's when it hit me. He's 9 years old. He's the little brother. He has never in his life known how to do something his big brother didn't know how to do. And so I said, "Were you so excited to tell your brother how to play this game?" And he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I've never gotten to teach him how to play a game before." And we were able to talk about that, and I was able to validate that emotion for him so that he felt like that was an okay way to feel. And then we still talked about how maybe your brother needs to read the instructions. But I didn't just dismiss his emotions or feelings or ways of wanting to do things simply because I thought I knew how it needed to be handled, because what I thought was going on was that he was just being stubborn. I was totally off. I was totally wrong. And it was mindfulness that allowed me to really figure out what was happening in that situation. The next one we have is the classroom organization. And again, mindfulness connects really powerfully here with our behavior management. It could play into anything, but the behavior management is a really strong connection for our mindfulness here, because not only will it allow us to stay calm and stay in the moment, but it will also allow us to be more proactive, because mindfulness does ask that I stay in the moment and I'm not thinking about what happened yesterday or what that child did at a different time. I can handle each situation as it comes, and sometimes even notice problems that might occur before they arise, because I'm really paying attention to what's going on. And again, it allows me to make children a kind of a partner in that as well. So it's not all just me telling what's happening all the time, but it's this really effective behavior management, because we're working together and I'm not being reactive to those things. So again, I think of a situation I had in my classroom in my early teaching career, where I had two little 4-year-old girls, and one of them was playing with marbles and the other came and took the marbles. And definitely my first instinct was to tell her to give them back. The first little girl was playing with those. "We don't take our marbles. You need to give those back." And I didn't even know anything about mindfulness at this point, but I used it very unintentionally, because I made a choice to stay in the moment and believe that these children could solve this problem with my support. And so I was not going to be reactive and control the situation in a way that I knew would take care of it immediately. I was going to allow this to play out and be more of a facilitator. And so I worked with the girls, and I asked the first girl what she thought she could do to handle this problem. And she told the second girl, "Those are my marbles, give them back." And the second girl ignored her. And this happened about 2 times as I'm working with them. And then right as I'm about to give up on my staying in the moment and helping them through this, the second little girl says, "I know, I could keep 7 marbles and I could give you 7 marbles." And I don't even think there were 14 marbles, but she thought of this all on her own. And it was absolutely not how I would have solved the problem. I would have told her to give the marbles back in a kind way, but I would have told her to give the marbles back. And the first girl was perfectly fine with this compromise. She said, "Okay, that works great." And they split the marbles up and they played with the marbles together for the next half hour. No problem. All because I was able to stay in the moment and let go of my reactivity. I was able to really stop a situation that would have escalated if it had continued on by itself, or if I had even come in and just told her to give the marbles back, it probably would have escalated pretty quickly. So our last one is the instructional strategies. And this one, I think, ties to mindfulness, because when I go on autopilot, which is so easy to do, it is really hard to use new strategies. And so much of what's instructional support asks me to think about new strategies and be ready to implement them. And yet when I go on autopilot, I miss my opportunities to implement those strategies. They'll pass me by without me even noticing. So I think maybe you have some examples for this?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I think it's really interesting that with all of these, you've been talking about trying to lose our reactivity and to loosen up on feeling the need to control the situation. And I think that really plays in perfectly to the way we would want to respond to support instructional support in the classroom. Just like you said, that autopilot where we want to continue to do things as we always have, and we know that instructional support is a challenge for universally across the nation for teachers. So doing what we've always done is not going to always be effective for instructional support. We do need to try some new things. We do need to break those patterns of autopilot. And what really helps us to do that is to feel calm in that moment and to feel safe in that moment, and to kind of normalize those feelings of when you're trying something new and different. You might feel a little bit stressed out, or you might feel a little bit nervous, and to be able to normalize that and to be centered with that and say it's okay to feel, like things might be a little bit different here. I've got an opportunity to be brave, and I'm going to try something new to really support the growth and development for my students. To really help to promote that higher order thinking, to try those strategies to be more effective in the moment for that feedback, and to develop meaningful interactions to promote language in the classroom. And I like how you've given examples of parenting and then the classroom. So I'm going to give my own personal example from coaching, because I do a lot of coaching with class. And I myself have kind of gone through that struggle of initially as a new coach, really trying to kind of control the situation and to be really careful with those open-ended questions, because those were a little bit risky. I didn't know where they were going to take it. And instead, I was able to really come at peace with not knowing exactly what type of answers I would get with those open-ended questions, and knowing that I could always bring my learner back to the goal and the intentionality that I've set for our conference, and to help my learners really be part of that problem-solving process, where I'm using my conference with my teachers as a way to model the same types of interactions that I would want them to be using in the classroom with their students, I have to be really intentional about doing those with them in our work. So I want them to be able to have the opportunity to problem solve. I'm there to support that brainstorming, and I'm going to accept all answers and thoughts that they're coming up with as they're being creative, and help them think through how to go from an idea to actually implementing it in the classroom. And by my ability to be really effective in my response to them in that moment, and to scaffold for them, to clarify when needed, I'm not only helping them to better have an understanding of what effective and quality of feedback is, but I'm really modeling for them to be able to do that in the classroom, and I'm providing them those skills by doing that for them. But it takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes a lot of just breathing in the moment and trusting the process, and knowing that that I'll be able to get my teachers to where I need them to be at the end of our time together. And I think one thing that helps me with that is to think about coaching and the work with our children as more of a marathon and less of a sprint, because we rarely only have a couple hours with our learners. We usually have, a good amount of time with our learners, and to really trust the total amount of time that you have with them, to be able to scaffold them and take them in a successful journey, so that they feel like they are really building their skills, and they're feeling heard, and they're feeling understood, and they're feeling like they're a part of the process. That's so important with our adults, and incredibly important with our students for instructional support. And I think, Erin, everything that you've taught us about mindfulness would help to support our ability to do that. And so since we took you through a little bit of information about what mindfulness is, we helped kind of connect it to class so that you could better understand how it fits into class. We've got some questions that came in before our conference started, and we wanted to go through and answer those. I think those might be a lot of the same types of questions that you guys have on your mind. And then we'll definitely have some time for questions that you're thinking of as we've been talking.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mamie and Erin. Yeah, I feel like maybe we've even answered a couple of these questions already, but we'll dive in a little bit deeper. So the first question, my teachers already have so little time to plan, collaborate, or even use the restroom. How do I present this as something they have time for?
Okay, I'll take this one.
Okay.
So the great thing about mindfulness, in my opinion, is that it can be done anywhere, anytime. This is not something that you have to set aside a big block of time for all of the time. It's more about being intentional with the time you already have. So I talked a little bit about how mindfulness is a practice, kind of like exercise, but then you can use it in the moment. I want to clarify that a little bit more. I like to talk about mindfulness kind of in two separate situations, your high stakes and your low stakes types of situations. So low stakes, that's when I am practicing on my own. And the good thing is it doesn't have to be a separate time. It could be while I'm doing the dishes at home. It could be while I'm driving into work. It could be while I'm walking from my car into the school, and then from the front door into my classroom. It could be if I do get that bathroom break. It could be while I walk to and from the bathroom, and I practice my breathing. I practice focusing on the moment and bringing my mind back to the moment if it happens to stray from that, so that I can build up that skill set, so that when I'm in a high stakes situation, like during a small group time where I want to try some new instructional strategies, I can tap into that breath and come back to that mindset very quickly, where I can be in the moment. And so mindfulness doesn't work well if I'm not practicing it outside of those high stakes situations. But those low stakes situations don't have to be incredibly time consuming. You can be practicing mindfulness as you make copies for what you're getting ready to do tomorrow. At the copy maker, you can really focus on your breath and deepening that and paying attention to the sounds that you're hearing and thinking about the papers you're putting in and things like that. You can be mindful about these everyday activities that you're already doing and not have to add separate activities in.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's go to the next question. How can mindfulness practices be incorporated into the second step program? And this question temporarily stumped the three of us. We all had to do a little research. So thank you to the submitter of this question. We got to do some learning over here. And I think Mamie's gonna take a stab at this one.
Yeah, so I got to talk to some colleagues who have used Second Step, and it was great to find out that Second Step, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a social emotional curriculum. And I think if we think about, a lot of those social emotional curriculums out there, how can mindfulness really fit into a structured program to support social emotional growth and development? And if you think about it, those programs are all helping children to name emotions, understand emotions, regulate and manage their emotions, helping to support their executive functioning and their self-regulation in the classroom. And for all of that, the teacher really needs to be modeling all of those same skills for the children. And so a teacher who is able to model that self-regulation and able to model managing emotions, maybe having a stressful situation and being able to bring it down to a calmer situation is the actions are speaking volumes in the classroom. So the teacher being able to walk the walk and, to do all the things that they're teaching the children and talking about, to be able to focus on those in their daily practice with the students is such an important way to really support a program such as this. And it also really helps to establish an environment where children can support and develop those social emotional skills, and self-regulation will just thrive and flourish in an environment like that. So it not only helps the teacher to be able to model and explain what these processes are in their own real life work with them, but it also helps to set up the environment for children to be able to be successful in practicing them. So I hope that explains it a little bit.
Thanks, Mamie. All right, let's see. Next we have, what are some simple techniques I can use with my pre-K students? So instead of as a teacher sort of managing my own mental health emotions, what are some ways we can help our pre-K students?
Yeah. So mindfulness, the beginning practice of it is so simple that you can teach your pre-K students a very similar practice to what I just walked you through, where you're asking them to breathe and focus on their breath. And maybe you even give them anchor words like in and out as they're breathing, and encourage them to think through those words as they breathe. And just focus a very short amount of time on it for young children, maybe 1 to 2 minutes a day, asking children to go through that brief breathing practice with you. You can talk them through thinking about how their body feels, just like I did with you. Where does your body feel tight? Can you take a breath and let that tightness go out of your body? And it's just as simple as that. And so I think the challenge for us as educators is to think, where in my day can I find 2 minutes to try to do this? Is there a time in my day, maybe as we're all coming together in the classroom, first thing in the morning, can I set aside 2 minutes a day to do a very brief breathing exercise body scan with my children? Another thing that a lot of us already do in the classroom that we could make a little more mindful is our attention focusing technique. So a lot of us have some kind of a chant or a noisemaker that we might use to bring children's attention back to us. And if you can use something like that really mindfully, it can be helpful and bring sometimes a little more calm to that transition. So I have it with me so I could bring it on the screen. I have a little mindfulness bell like this that makes a very pleasant sound when you hit it, and you don't just bang on it like a gong. To use it mindfully, you would explain to children ahead of time that when they hear the bell, their job is to stop what they're doing and do some deep breaths and think about what the sound of the bell is like. And in the process of doing that, as they're focusing on the bell and having to think about what it sounds like and how it's getting quieter instead of louder, because I just hit it one time, just one tap is all I do, that's going to naturally bring their attention back to the moment and allow for a very mindful transition as well. So that's two easy things that most of us could incorporate into our classroom right away.
Thank you. All right. Our next one. I'd love to bring mindfulness practice to my teachers. I can see buy-in being an issue, like it's just one more thing. How do I convince them this could improve their teaching experience or at least their class scores? This one's a little similar to the first one of nobody feels like they have enough time. And so I think the sort of answer to the first one might help with this one, but how else can we convince buy-in?
I would say that this is actually similar to so many things that were asked about classes. You know, how can I incorporate this other curriculum to it? How can I incorporate this other evaluation tool? These other strategies and initiatives that we had going in our school. There's always something else that you know, many things that teachers are trying to do at the same time. And I love how this comment started with, I'd love to bring mindfulness practice to my teachers. So this tells me that this is a coach or an administrator asking this question. And I would really challenge all of our administrators, coaches, to think about how they first can figure out a way to align it themselves and then present it as an aligned piece. Instead of presenting it, this is class, and this is mindfulness, and this is our curriculum. Think about ways to present it so it's all aligned already and it comes together. And I bet if you just spend a little bit of time thinking about how it really could be incorporated together, then you present it as that. And so it's no longer they're trying to fit these two things together. They already understand how they go together. Or if they've already been utilizing class and mindfulness is something new, then think about how to connect it to what they already know and what they're already doing in their classroom. And I would say even take it that step higher and think about ways that you can incorporate it into your work, in your delivery, in your everyday practice. Because it's not just what we say to our teachers, but it's what we do. And they'll learn so much more what you're just modeling for them in the way in which you're starting to be more mindful in your practice is really going to have a great effect on them thinking about how it will connect to what they're doing in their classroom. So it's all about alignment and thinking it through and being intentional about that.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Our next one, what books or resources would you recommend for beginners who want to learn more? And I went ahead and snuck some pre-answers on. This is the book that Erin had mentioned earlier, Teach, Breathe, Learn, and a couple others. This is her website, Enlightening Educators, that I'll link to in the CLC. And this is a website that she had recommended when we were talking mindful schools. But I'll go ahead and let you two answer as well.
Great. So my first recommendation is always that book, Teach, Breathe, Learn. It's written by an educator for educators. And it is a really nice, succinct example of what mindfulness is and how it applies to everything that we're doing in the education world, and talks about not just strategies that we can use as teachers, but ways that we can introduce these concepts to our students as well. And if you are a teacher of older students, probably elementary or above, there are even some sample lesson plans in the back of the book that you could use. It's a little advanced probably for lower elementary and below, but for those upper grades, there's some really great lesson plan and activity ideas in the back of that book as well. The other website I really like is that Mindful Schools. They have so many resources and articles on their page, again, all specifically for educators, talking about how I can use mindfulness as an educator and help teach it to my children, just so that they have that as a tool in their own lives. And Mindful Schools also has a couple of courses in mindfulness as well that I have taken, and they're really good. They're really valuable courses. Of course, I have some resources. I'll be honest, I am not the best at keeping my website updated, but if you go to my website, you'll find a link to my Facebook page. And on that one, I keep everyone pretty up to date on what I'm doing, and I post videos on my Facebook page sometimes, and I share articles that I think are valuable around mindfulness and education, and all kinds of things on that Facebook page. And one more website, if you want more of just a general website, not an education specific one, is mindful.org. And it's just everything about mindfulness. And there are a lot of audio guided mindfulness practices on that website, which is really nice. If you find a search bar on that website and just type in beginning mindfulness practice, you'll find some little audio clips that'll take you through. I'm sorry, the lights keep going in my room because I'm being too still. So mindful.org will give you a lot of information, but I like it specifically for the audio mindfulness practices, where it will guide you through, kind of like I guided you through earlier.
Erin, can I ask a quick question that was on the chat? Somebody would like to know just a little bit more specifically the book that you suggested that had the examples for the upper elementary school students. How might a preschool teacher utilize that book?
So even though the lesson plan examples are for older students, the book gives a very good explanation. The bulk of the book is about how I use mindfulness as an educator, and what that means for me and what that looks like for me. And so that book is the one that gave me ideas about how to use mindfulness while I'm walking to and from the bathroom, and while I'm doing my copies and things like that, because she is an educator, even though of older kids, and really understands the struggles that all of us understand as educators, and puts mindfulness in terms that I think anyone who's ever been a teacher can really relate to. So even though you may not be able to use the lesson plans out of it if you have younger kids, everything that she talks about in that book as far as what we can do as educators is going to be applicable.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we only have about 8 minutes left, unfortunately, but we do have some time to open it up to any questions you have now. So go ahead and use that chat box if you have a question. We'd love to take the next 6-7 minutes to try and tackle it.
They could always also unmute at this point, right?
Sure.
Since there's only 18 people. So.
Well, I might start giving my wrap-up speech, but if you are typing a question, please keep typing, and we will come to it. But I did want to let you know that any additional questions you have, you are always welcome to put in the CLC. I will put the video link, and you can start that thread and ask questions there, or share ideas, or share things that you're planning on bringing back to your classroom, or to your coaching conversations, or to your school. Both Mamie and Erin are in the CLC, and so that can be a great place to start that conversation. And otherwise, we just say thank you, and thank you to Mamie, and thank you to Erin. They volunteered their time and expertise, and I know it's always nice to learn from the experts.
Thank you.
And thank you, Erin, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I had fun.
All right. Well, it looks like there are no questions. So thank you, everybody, for coming and for attending. And you can take a look in the CLC for the video shortly. Thanks, everybody.